Hello, this is going to be part 4 on my stargazing project series of videos. In the last one, I had identified this as being the most likely candidate for Altair. And so the next question that I had was, if I have a few known celestial objects like Altair, the sun, the moon, etc., am I able to determine the camera's position and orientation? And so obviously the first thing that I had to do was to locate the object in the image and note the time. I found a night that had no cloud cover and loaded an image like this one, noting that this was going to be somewhere around X coordinate of about 706 and a Y coordinate of about 878. And then I put it into a spreadsheet like this. This was the manually entered portion of the spreadsheet. I found a formula online that calculates where the star should appear in the sky for the given time. And this is the rest of it. I just pushed this part of the equation over to the end so I didn't have to deal with it. I start off with the star's celestial coordinate. It calculates the local hour angle for that particular time, and then I'm able to convert the local hour angle and declination into altitude and azimuth. At that point, I tried to project where on the image it should be. I use the Cartesian coordinate system, so anything less than 180 azimuth would be a negative x value. Anything above my camera's altitude would be a positive y value, etc. After taking the coordinates in the image and turning them into a Cartesian coordinate system, I then subtracted the one from the other, and then I got an x delta, y delta. At this point, the intent was to change the rotation angle, the azimuth, and the camera tilt values to get as low a value for x and y deltas as possible. And I wasn't entirely surprised to see a parabolic curve like this. I did realize that there was going to be more corrective factors involved to get it to match my observed values. But at this point, it did take quite a bit of time to play around with the angle rotation, the azimuth adjust, and the camera tilt. This was the camera's altitude, where the center of the frame should be pointing at 55 degrees altitude. The azimuth adjust should be how many degrees east or west of south from 180. And then of course the angle rotation would be how far the camera was rotated along the barrel of the lens. I applied a bit of a zoom factor adjust, and that was pretty much it. It took me a little while to get this, and a lot of it was trial and error. So I play with the numbers. So let's say I change it to 6, and you can see that it changed the value slightly. Camera tilt as well. If I tab out of that, you can see that the values should change somewhat. These values change, but not by a whole lot. And if I change the azimuth, these values change, but not by a whole lot. And it doesn't really show too much in this graph. But I wasn't entirely satisfied or impressed with what I got so far. I thought I was going to try something slightly different. Now this one here was a very manual and labor-intensive process. I tried something similar for the moon. So I went and loaded an image where I saw the moon, noted the coordinates. So it should be somewhere around 1160 by about 1138. And I put it in the spreadsheet like this. And I didn't have an easily or reasonably accurate formula to calculate the moon's coordinates. So this one was very manually intensive as well. So for each date and time, I went on to MoonCalc. And for my general geolocation, I entered the time and the date, grabbed the altitude and the azimuth, 34.16, 169.76, and I entered it in here. And then at this point, I did a very similar calculation as well. I transformed the image coordinates into a Cartesian coordinate system, calculated the expected location directly in the Cartesian coordinate system, and then applied a delta between the two. This one was very different and had huge errors in it. At that point, what I needed was a lot more data points, and I needed to think about how I could go about the different formulas to correct that. I'm going to cover this part not today, but in another video, probably the next one. But by that point, it looked like there was going to be a lot of work involved to come up with different formulas to model the images that I had been taking all this time. So I put this project on the back burner and I thought about it a little bit. A few weeks went by, a few months went by, and I found myself trying to revisit this project back in spring of last year, I believe. Manually loading each image one by one, noting the geocoordinate position and transcribing it into a spreadsheet was extremely tedious and time consuming, and I wanted a way to automate the process slightly. I took an application that I had developed for one of my previous projects. It's one of my videos, and I modified it slightly to be able to load those images captured from the camera. Now in this case here, I lined up the flare lines to the center, which was more here, even though the center appeared to be slightly off in this case. So it would be a matter of clicking the mouse button where the center was supposed to be, and then I just go on to the next one. And then every time I click it, it just adds to the end of a CSV file. I captured one sweep of the sun, I believe, and a couple of stars, but then I went and did the same thing for the moon. At this point, I had nearly a month's worth of moon transits across the frame of my camera, and I then decided to put that into GIMP. So there's the image. I added crosshairs to locate the center of the frame, and then I rotated the image like this to try to make each sweep across the frame as straight and as horizontal as I could. But I was slightly curious to see whether or not these sweeps were different. So I added these little squares here on the overlay. And if you can see, the moon sweeps across the sky kind of like in a parabolic shape in the middle of the frame. And it goes above the center frame right about here, maybe closer to there, and very similar over here. I did something similar on the left side here. Without the center marker layer, you can see that at the bottom of the image, the moon sweeps across the sky in a slightly more flat arc, and the higher you go, the more parabolic it becomes. This kind of surprised me because it would be the opposite of what I would expect for barrel distortion. I would expect it to be slightly more rounded in this direction at the top and slightly more rounded in this direction at the bottom if it was barrel distortion. But it almost seems to be the opposite, implying that it's not an outward pincushion, but an inward pincushion. When I saw that, I figured that the camera didn't really have any great significant barrel distortion in this particular project, and that I would have to find some other way to finish this off. And I really didn't have any idea at that time how I was going to continue to work on this. So again, I put this project aside and I kept thinking about how I was going to do the next part of it. At this point, I'm going to leave that for now, and I will make another video to describe what I did next. That's it for now. Thanks for watching, and do the usual YouTube stuff if you like this video. And I will see you hopefully in another video soon enough. So bye for now.